Good afternoon and welcome to Conversations on Showing Up for Kids. My name is Tim Markle. I'm director of the now named Children's Resource Center South. It used to be called the Southern Regional Center for Children and Youth with Special Health Care Needs, which took me approximately 14 years to say in one breath. And we are now the Children's Resource Center South, along with 4 other children's resource centers throughout the state. We still are here to help families and professionals to access resources, find support, and get answers to their questions about the system of care around their children and youth with special health care needs and disabilities. Conversations is this time that we set aside to talk about different topics that family members send in, or that I, as a family member of a parent of a child, as a parent of a child with special health care needs, I sit there and go, what is it that I wish I would have talked about or had a group to talk about with me about this, or what do I need to know? So it's a wide variety of topics. So very excited today that we have a friend of mine, Danielle, is here to talk about her experience with having a child with special health care needs and making that choice to homeschool, what that looked like and what's involved in it. So first of all, welcome, Danielle. Please feel free to introduce yourself however you would care to introduce yourself.
Thanks, Tim. As you said, I'm Danielle. I am a mom of a young adult who's affected by special health care needs. And I am also grandma to a teen and a few toddlers, also with special health care needs. I'm coming to you from it was sunny a moment ago, partly cloudy, Portage, in just between Madison and Wisconsin Dells. But yeah, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right. So can you tell us a little, and I am still in, oh, no, you're right, partly cloudy Stoughton. So it may look sunny, but it's really just partly cloudy.
Yeah.
So totally understand that. So let's start with, at what point did you, because I know you haven't been a homeschooler from birth, parent, that your family was that's just not who you were. So can you just tell us a little bit about when you chose to begin homeschooling?
Our son, by the way, his first name is Chaz. So you'll hear me use that name quite a bit. That's our guy. When we made the transition, and by the way, not in the current school district where I'm living, just to clarify, he was attending public school, things were going well. And when we crossed the threshold into middle school, started 6th grade, it was a different environment, different expectations of our kids, right? They're a little older. And there were some things that weren't clicking. The fit that used to be there wasn't quite there. And it was just the right time for us to really consider homeschooling. One of the things I wanted to be sure to mention, Tim, if this is a good time, is really what homeschooling is when I use that term.
Absolutely. But I do want to just quickly stress that it's a matter of fit for families. Is just like we continually, we have conversations around other families, how the current style of education in some of our schools does not fit the neurodiversity of the students in that classroom. It can also be true that the setting that the education is taking place in also does not fit the neurodiversity of the student or the needs of the family. And as much as there's that conversational aspect of trying to make things work, there are some times where to learn, there needs to be a different environment. And we want to honor that in parents. At the same time, we are honoring the people that are working in this educational system that has developed the way that it has developed over decades. So with that said, I think that's one of the biggest questions families have, because we've heard a lot, especially, now that we are post-pandemic, not post-COVID, post-pandemic, we had a lot of in-schooling and homeschooling and schooling at home and educating at home. And then in the midst of that, were families that were homeschooling,
Yeah.
going, what the heck are you all talking about? So yeah, give us a little bit of a primer on what do you mean by homeschooling?
For as again, this is all with under the umbrella and the um the precursor that I am a parent. I'm a mom. I'm glad to share my experiences. I'm not an expert. So don't hold me 100% to anything that I share. And I'll do my best to preface things by saying from what I understand and from what I know, because that's where this is coming from. As I understand it, when we talk about school, there's several different silos, and each of them sort of have their own rules and their own practices and their own standards. Homeschooling has become a broadened term that can simply mean doing learning at home. And with technology coming around, that can mean doing public school work at home through, I think there's several programs out there like K-12 and other programs. So it's effectively public schooling done at home, homeschool. There's also, I want to say, traditional homeschool, which is what we did, where we completely, frankly, severed our relationship and connection to the public school system. So there's homeschooling slash public school done at home, and homeschooling where you are, frankly, completely on your own. Does that help?
That it does, because I know, and I will try to help clarify through my own experience as a parent,
Yeah.
is that we started our children. I have a son and a daughter. Son Hunter is right around Chaz's age, and if they lived closest together, they'd probably be best buds. But we just can't figure that out because there's distance. But we started our children in a private school because my wife was a teacher in that private school. After that, we moved out of our town into Madison, and it made a lot more sense with our job situation to put them in public schools. And that's when he started to receive IEP services. He was receiving early childhood services down here. And for the most part, that was a really good experience. When we moved back to Stoughton was right about that same age Chaz was, that middle school age. And the district was undergoing through some changes, and they didn't have a friend base that they were going into. And my wife had the background in education, which we'll talk about credentialing later. And she's like, well, why don't we try this homeschooling? And so we did what you were describing as the traditional homeschooling, where she found the curriculum and she figured out how she wanted to teach that and how it was going to be supplemented, that whole stuff. And that worked for a couple of years. Then my daughter chose to go back to the brick and mortar school. My son chose to continue with virtual schooling through one of the K-12 schools. And so we then had that difference of virtual school versus homeschool versus tradition. So it can get confusing.
Yes.
So I love the explanation about what homeschooling is. So with that little bit of my experience as well, which is why we wanted this to have a conversation, because we've talked about this before.
Yeah.
So my wife she actually had an education degree, and she homeschooled the way, but it wasn't but I will say it was not in junior high. Her emphasis was early childhood, even though she was qualified. And so the older they got, the more she had to research how to teach them. So did you have an education degree? Do parents need to have some sort of degree to homeschool their children?
As I understand it, here comes the disclaimer.
Right.
As I understand it, no. A really good resource to find that out for certain is, of course, the state statutes when it comes to this, but the Wisconsin Homeschool Parent Association, or the WPA, I think is the acronym. They have a really good website. When you go to the website, there's a button around in the middle that says start here. And it's literally, that's the spot to go to find out. Thank you. About what's required. As I understand it, no, there's nothing requiring parents to have a specific degree. They don't have to have a teaching degree. At the time, I didn't have my undergrad degree when I started effectively teaching Chaz. I think there's an expectation that if in Wisconsin, and again, this varies from state to state, there's an expectation that in Wisconsin, if parents are willing to take on this responsibility, it's because they feel equipped to do so. But that is an assumption.
So yes, I did put in the WPA site as well as their link to the actual homeschool law, because you do want to understand what the law requires.
Yes.
And what you might be able to expect from any sort of, if any, support from your local school system.
Wisconsin has, as I understand it, Wisconsin has one of the broadest sets of laws and regulations when it comes to traditional homeschooling, in that there is a number of hours that need to be completed in the year. The blessing to that is they don't say it needs to be between August and May. So
Right.
You can stretch it out, which is what we did. We stretched it out to all year long. So we didn't have those random Mondays off and half day Wednesdays and all those scheduling changes that would make Chaz and me a little nuts. So we stretched it out to shorter school days all year, essentially all year round. And that for us, that worked. For another family, they may want to condense that even more, or that's one of the blessings of it, is that flexibility. But with there is no, let me back up. This, as I understand it, the state has a set number of hours. They also require a progressive, a continuing and building upon, thank you for that, on the 5 core areas of educating. What those 5 are escape me at the moment, because it's been a few years since we did this, but I'm sure that they're listed on that WPA website. But effectively, you submit a form to the state once a year attesting that you are doing these things, covering these 5 areas in a curriculum that builds upon skill and becomes more and more challenging. And that you meet that number of hours and that your child attends. Because Wisconsin, we're still held to that compulsory attendance law. However, I've known families that their record keeping was initials on a calendar that they did learning on that day. And then for others, they might do more detailed record keeping, as far as writing down. We worked on math from 9 to 10, and we worked on art from noon to 2. So whatever that means to you. But again, I think one of the blessings of Wisconsin law when it comes to this is that it's very broad. And well, for parents like me with a kiddo that thrives with flexibility, that was a really good fit for us.
Yeah. So I was just looking on the page to try to find those 5. And of course I can't, because I need to. And that's the way it works with the web, is when you actually need to find something. But it does, the way they put it is it's a sequentially progressive curriculum. Oh, I found it. A sequentially progressive curriculum of fundamental instruction in reading, language arts, mathematics, social science, science, and health. So those are the core, and that whole idea of sequentially progressive. But they don't give you a curriculum that you have to follow, do they?
With traditional homeschooling, no, that's actually up to the parents. There's a whole lot of tools out there, though, to help with that. There are sets of curriculum that you can go online and buy, that you, as long as you meet those standards for, you know, the increasing difficulty in those subjects, you can use that. It does, your curriculum does not need to be approved by anyone, but it's a good idea, I think, to still have one. The tool that worked well for me is this. It's a little bit silly, but it worked well for me. Is there's a book series out there. This is not an endorsement, called What Every Blank Grader Should Know. You know, and they have it all through 12, through all 12 grades. So there's one book of what every second grader should know, another what every third grader should know. They are usually available very inexpensively and frequently used because of other homeschool parents on Amazon, and like $5 or less, or even through the local library if you want to just request one and give it a browse. I used those books. I still have them because I would actually write in them the date of when we covered that material. And I really used, those books are very helpful to me as a guide. One of the things that homeschooling allowed us to do is to really individualize things. And when I say that, our kiddo is super smart. This kid's been using the phrase structural rigidity since about the time since, you know, he was 3. However, reading and the process of decoding letters into sounds and putting sounds together into words, and that those words have meaning, was something that he was really struggling with. So we were able to super accommodate that by, frankly, having everything, literally everything, be video and discussion or hands-on with manipulatives. You know, we would watch a video on the Civil War, and we would, you know, it's a video that I watched in advance, more on prep in a minute, but we'd watch a video and I would pause it at certain points and we'd talk about it, and I'd ask him questions like, so how would you feel if you inserted yourself into that time period? What if this happened instead? Could things have maybe had a different outcome? What about this? And just inserted some discussion points along the way, things to think about. And at the same time that we were doing video and discussion and using games for math and learning to tell time using a clock that had hands that moved, and, you know, good old Google coming up with all kinds of interesting games for those things. We were also working with an outside tutor who was exploring all different methods of decoding and reading for Chaz. So we were doing topical discussions on where his knowledge was, but at the same, and it took the pressure off the fact that he wasn't reading, while at the same time working with an outside tutor to help him build those reading skills. So it was a really nice balance of playing on strengths while acknowledging what was harder and working to make those a little easier.
And with that small class size, I'm sure that you were able to get creative in the different, you know, venues, as well as the different manipulatives, different tools that you had around the house, like maybe using plastic eggs or Nerf,
Yes.
for instance.
Yes. One of the things that I found, and I learned a lot about Chaz through this process, about what worked for him and what didn't work as well for him. One of the things that did work well for him is when he had the perception, at least, of having some control over what we did and when. So I got creative, like Tim said, in that I would use those little plastic eggs that we put candies in the spring. I used those, and instead of candies, I would put little pieces of paper in there. One, you know, I might have 6 or 8 eggs that we would try to cover in a day. They would include, you know, math, reading, video, go for a walk, 20-minute screen break, you know, so a variety of things that are both, you know, academic, but also some preferred activities, and pepper them out. And we put them in a bag and shake them up. And so he would choose what we were doing next. And him having that buy-in was really helpful. Something else we did is I took red Solo cups and I wrote inside them, which was really tricky, by the way, with a Sharpie,
Yeah.
writing inside the red Solo cups. And I would put them all on a ledge, give him his Nerf blaster, and I'm like, okay, fire away and pick one. And so it became a game, but I think that he had the perception of having some control
Yeah,
over what came
absolutely.
next. And that was really big.
Awesome. So what happens though? I know that some families are receiving like OT or PT through their school. When you homeschool, how do you continue to receive therapy services, or do you?
Generally, as I understand it, no. At least that wasn't the case for me. When you effectively walk away from the school, you're also walking away from all of the supports that they tend to offer. What we did is I contacted my son's primary care doctor, and I think it was just through my chart saying, hey, I'm wondering about this. We're making the transition to homeschooling. He used to receive speech and OT through school. Can we please have a referral to those within our network so he can be evaluated to continue those services? Sure thing, no problem. That's all that I think that they needed to hear. They gave us a referral for evaluation for those things. When we went for that evaluation session, I brought his IEPs from the last 2 years so they could look and see what they had been working on. And it actually worked out really, really well. To me, I found that instead of receiving 10 minutes of speech twice a week, it was an hour of speech twice a week.
Oh, wow.
And in addition to that, we worked with a really good SLP, speech language pathologist, who understood that we were homeschooling. So she would give us homework, frankly, to do in between that helped him continue to practice. Because for Chaz, when he learns a new skill, it needs to be repeated until it moves from short-term memory to long-term memory. And that takes patience and time and repetition. And she was supportive of that and gave us some things that we could do between sessions to keep that momentum going. So certainly, so we were able to still access those services outside, and we really worked hard to develop a partnering relationship with those healthcare professionals. And it was all covered by his Medicaid at that point.
Cool. Now, I know, especially with speech therapy, sometimes those therapy appointments at school will take place in small groups. And so that it also gives the kiddos a chance to socialize in small groups, and school is a great chance to socialize in large groups. And I know that's one of the things that we struggled with when we were homeschooling Hunter, was how to help him continue to learn how to make friends, how to meet people, how to interact with people. How did you handle the socialization aspect of growth as you were homeschooling?
I was really worried about that going in. But to be honest, Chaz he's now 22. We finished homeschooling at 19. He is actually right now at this very moment visiting with another homeschooling family that we met and became connected to, and that friendship continues. I think that, let me figure out where to start. For our experience was that the homeschooling community was very welcoming and frankly, very non-judgmental. They came to know Chaz as the kid that knows a lot about Roblox and Minecraft. They didn't recognize him as, frankly, anything else. They recognized him for, well, all of the things that I do as a mom. Getting connected to those groups was honestly through social media. I think that when you go through social media or even to Google, put in there your city or your nearest largest city and the word homeschool and see what comes up. There's everything from not formalized groups on Facebook of parents in a community that look to get together, once a week for an activity, to formal co-ops. We've been connected to both, and it's very fun and help facilitate new experiences too. For example, in our local group at one time, my husband volunteered to lead a series of science classes. So we were able to reserve a conference room at the library for free. There was probably 8 to 12 local parents, and we would do this on Thursday afternoons at 2 p.m. And as long as the parent is side by side with the student and they are, there could be an instructor in the front of the room, but as long as the parent is part of that, that is still considered teaching time and school time. If you drop off your child and leave, correct, then it's not. So that's an important distinction. But he would, the parents would each chip in $3 a piece towards supplies, and we would make bridges out of things, which my engineer loved, along with many of his other students. And by the way, Chaz would help us pick what activities or science themes we wanted to do. Another parent might reserve that same room at the library, again for free, on Monday mornings for an art class, because art was that mom's thing, and so she would volunteer to put on an art class. We would on Friday afternoons have a field trip to someplace new. And again, parents would each take a turn. We went behind the scenes at Papa John's and Papa Murphy's, which was very interesting. We went.
Don't tell me. I
Okay.
really don't want to know.
It's all good.
I enjoy food way too much to ever learn how it's actually done.
But how the magic happens though was really interesting. My husband arranged for a field trip to the Portage Power Plant, which is one of the last, and I hear it's outgoing, by the way, coal-powered power plant. So, but to get behind the scenes and look inside this window and see, inside the smokestacks and those kinds of things. So it's really neat. And for us, one things that I like to do is whatever that field trip was on Friday, I would try to fold that into that whole week's themes. We would read about, the history, maybe different types of energy, or we would watch short videos on different types of energy. We would talk about, well, how is energy measured? It can be.
Hopefully she'll unfreeze in just a moment. Or will rejoin us. So this is a good time, unless it's me that's frozen. If you have questions that you would like to talk to Danielle, please feel free to unmute when she comes back and joins us, or you could put them into the chat and I will be sure to relay them to her. I also kind of want to take a screenshot, but that would just be me mean. So hopefully she will be back to join us in a moment. But are there anybody else out there with experience and would like to talk or just talk about, what they have learned and what they know? Please feel free as we wait for her to reconnect. I can also tell you a little bit about our experiences too. One of the biggest things that my wife would do something very similar to what Danielle did. And that's if we would have like a trip to the Shed Aquarium, then leading up to that trip, there would be, the lessons about the fish or about Chicago or whatever the interest may be for each of the kids to try to help them identify with where they were going even before they got there. So that pre-work. And I know one of the things that she may not have time to talk about is if it sounds like it takes work, it does. Danielle says that she averaged probably that she would spend 4 hours on a Sunday afternoon to plan out the upcoming week, from ordering those books, finding the Google videos that she might want to use, looking for new math games if that was where they were at, whatever they would need to do. So I know that there is time. And then that time spent connecting with the co-ops and finding a group that fits, finding a place for where your kiddo can belong. And that's one of the things with the outside activities can be really important for our kids. One of the things that really helped Hunter was getting involved in 4-H. And so outside organizations like that, or their wherever their interest may lie, can also be really important. So I am just going to take a quick walk over to my email to see if I have any notes from, okay, here she comes back. All right.
I'm back. Sorry about that.
That's okay. That's
I'm
okay.
in a rural area, and so sometimes the old internet just kind of goes boop. And yes, so where did I leave you?
Well, you left us with talking about the social connectedness, and I reiterated the finding a group that belongs, and talked a little bit about what we did with Hunter and the importance of outside groups such as 4-H, and that find something that captures their interest and go for it.
Yep.
Basically, is keep trying. So you mentioned that Chaz is now how old?
22.
22. So you've been through what we call this magical transition age of leaving that high school age group and looking ahead toward, what do I want to be as an adult? What do I want to do as an adult? Now, there are certain parts of the education system that are designed to help families walk through that area of transition and to look at jobs and to consider colleges and what can you do to take charge of help your child take charge of their health care and these important areas of adulting.
Yes.
How'd you manage that time of transition as a homeschooler?
For us, we just really had to be very intentional. I think that, we found ourselves in this position of constantly providing support. And then about that, about 15, we were like, he's going to have to, at some point in his life, be able to do this himself and be comfortable and confident doing so. So we started kind of, leaning back. It can be as simple as those early choice making skills, ordering for himself at a restaurant, checking himself in at the doctor's office. So we started small. But as far as the more formal things, we had to seek that out ourselves. I actually called DVR directly myself, the Department of Vocational Rehabilitation.
Perfect.
He indicated to us that he wasn't interested in college right now. And so we certainly respected that. And again, we were working really hard on reading skills, which as his mom, I knew that might be an obstacle, that it might not be the right time yet for college. And again, deferring to his decision, he chose that. And I contacted DVR, and I have to admit, at first they were like, oh yeah, your school will contact us. And I said, nope, wait, don't hang up. And I had to explain, we're homeschooling. Oh yeah, but they'll still get a hold of you. And I had to say, no, actually they won't. And so I had to be a little bit persistent, but we did get connected with programs through DVR. Like, he was able to try out some jobs through some internships in some different roles. Including spending one summer at the Baraboo Zoo, which he loved that, and we were still able to work it out around schooling, because again, remember, at this time we were schooling year round, and so it works. but like we had to be very intentional about it.
All right. Well, we are slowly getting to the end of our time today. So I want to make sure that if people would like to unmute, I can see that you unmute. You do not have to turn your camera on. Raise your hand, just unmute your microphone. I'll call on you if you have questions, if you want to join discussion. Again, if you have some experience and things to share, that would be fantastic. We would love to have that conversation. We want to have conversations. But did you ever contemplate Chaz going back into the public schools? And do you know how that would work?
We initially, that was our plan. That was our plan, that, you know, we would kind of take this break from public school, build up his, you know, build up his reading skills, because that was one of the things he was really struggling with in school, and then have him re-enter public school. Life happens, things change. And so he ended up not doing that. And that was okay. What I did continue to do, though, is to keep some records about the things that we were covering.
Ooh.
We kept records on the things that we were covering so that I could provide a transcript if one was requested or if one was needed. The Wisconsin Parent Association, by the way, holds a conference every year. And one evening of their conference is a great big splashy graduation ceremony. And as a homeschooler, by the way, you decide when they've met your requirements for completion and for graduation. So we did that. It was pandemic, and which made it hard, but we did have a big party that summer outside at a public park, and it was all very good. But yeah, I apologize, Tim. Did that answer your question?
Yes. So
Okay.
there is a way, once you choose homeschooling, it doesn't mean that you are forever severing the ties with your public school, but
Right.
it's really smart to keep some sort of records. You need to keep that attendance record anyway,
Yep.
but then also the records of sort of what you have learned and where they're at. I would also think that would also apply for like outside therapies that have been taking place, so that you can have this complete whole person that you're then introducing back to the public school system.
Yes. And as I have not re-entered, so I can't speak to that experience, but I do know other families that have transitioned or pivoted from true, homeschooling to an online school when they got to high school age, that they made that pivot. And there was some adjustments. It took a minute to find their footing in this new environment, but they were able to do so successfully, and they have no regrets. So,
and it goes back to what we started with.
yep.
Is what are the needs of that student? What are their strengths? How can we maximize those strengths for learning? Because the point of school is learning the facts, but also learning how to grow up.
Yes.
Learning how to become an adult. And we can do that in a number of ways. We are learning more and more about how different all of our brains work and how we process information and how we express information. And so having options, I think, is really important for our students and for our children. At this point, any questions would be great. Please put them into the chat. I will relay them. Please feel free to turn off your microphone and I'll call on you. But Danielle, any closing thoughts about homeschooling and your experience with Chaz?
I did ask Chaz what he thought of homeschooling. And the one thing that he often refers to is that it took the pressure off. He said it really took the pressure off. And I thought, I didn't realize he was under pressure before, but it was his perception. So, which means that was his reality, and that is what he was feeling. So it really worked for us. If we started Monday and he wasn't in a place of learning as I had planned, it was okay. We got up and we went for a walk. Our kids love that regulation. We'd go out and go for a walk, or frankly, we'd go to the gym and we'd swim. We'd go do something else. We'd come back. And sometimes we would be doing math at the kitchen table in the evening at 6 p.m. But if he was feeling it and that was the time that was working for him, that's when we did it. Sometimes we might have to wrap up some things on Saturday morning, and that's okay. So when he was ready to learn, we did it. And when he wasn't ready, that was okay. We could pivot, we could do something else, revisit it. And so that's kind of where sometimes I refer to it being the ultimate in being individualized, because he really did lead his day, and we were still able to get everything accomplished that we needed to. Well, clearly. But
awesome. Well, thank you for that. I'm not seeing anything popping up, and so I just really want to thank you, Danielle, for sharing your experience as a parent of a child who has special needs, and also who has been part of a couple of different education systems, and what your experience is with homeschooling. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And I did throw into the chat, if you have a moment to give us a little bit of feedback survey, that would be fantastic. If not, we'll see you all till the next time. Thank you so very much.